Well, this is going to be a fun week ahead. We are starting this off with warm, record high temperatures, and we're going to see some changes, and a lot of that is going to be moved along by a tropical storm, perhaps, as it develops over the next couple of days. Wintertime continues in the west, and long range, we've got a wholesale pattern change to talk about over the next couple of weeks. So fasten your seatbelts, folks. It's going to be a rather bumpy Joe and Joe weather show. Brought to you by Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York, and Southwest Suffolk County on Long Island, serving the entire New York, New Jersey, Connecticut tri-state area with everything you need to make sure you get through this winter, which includes rock salt. It's always better to get stuff when the weather is the exact opposite, because that's when it's cheaper. And we've got rock salt, and they have the lowest prices around. And, of course, you could still be thinking, well, let me fix up my yard and make it look good for the rest of the fall. But we also, again, should remember that adverse weather conditions means you need supplies to get you through, like batteries, flashlights, generators, some pumps, and just about a whole long list of things that you might want to make sure you have in full working order. 631-756-1125 for the best prices in town. And the website is
OmniTrueValue.com. Good morning, Joe.
Yes, good morning. I just realized that I got to get rid of myself here. Hold on a second. Very nice.
Methinks I'm going to get a bottle of water. So hang on for a moment while I run in.
Okay, but all right, let's hope we don't get that lovely audio stuff that happens. So maybe it's not going to happen this time. Okay, so let me get this screen set up. This happens every time. You know, one of the things about taking time off for me, taking that extra day, is I just sort of forget how I have to do things in terms of all the technical stuff. But I'll get it all in order.
Getting old stinks, doesn't it?
It does. So I'm just kind of curious because I saw temperatures yesterday made the mid to upper 70s. Just how for many areas in eastern PA to southern New England, Newark got to 79 yesterday, which was a record. 74, I believe, at Islip, which was a record. So how did you do up there in the Hudson Valley lower section?
At approximately 1:30 on Saturday, the temperature at Westchester County Airport hit 75 degrees. And that broke the old record of 73 set back in 2005. I had one guy, Joe, a wiseacre, if you will, who said, no, you're
a Weisenheimer.
A Weisenheimer, yes. He said, no, you're wrong. He said, because I said the record hit 75, breaking the old record of 73. He said, no, you're wrong. When it got to 74, it broke the old record of 73. And then when it hit 75, it broke the new record of 74. And I said, what are you, a butcher? Do you like to bust chops? You know, that's unbelievable. I mean, the people out there, they have nothing better to do to pick on it. But it was the old record was 73 at the airport, Westchester Airport, in 2005. And the new record now is 75 degrees for the 5th of November. Now, 75 degrees in White Plains is perfectly normal for the 6th of June or the 7th of September. The normal high for November 5th is 19 degrees cooler at 56. And we are in for potentially record-breaking temperatures for 2 more days. The record for today at the airport, 72, set back in 2015. That's only 7 years ago. And Monday's record is 73, and we broke that record. Well, we set that record 2 years ago in 2022. And I made a mistake, and I made a correction here. I said yesterday that the 75 at White Plains is the warmest reading ever reported so late in the fall season. And I was incorrect on that. And the reason I was incorrect is that I did a quick look at the record book, and I failed to realize that, you know, I have extensive daily records, and for November 15th, by far the lion's share of what was written for the 15th of November concerned the big snowstorm that we all remember 4 years ago in 2018. And I overlooked, almost as if a footnote, was the fact that on that same day in 1993, the temperature hit 77 at White Plains Westchester Airport. So that, the 15th of November, is with 77 is the warmest temperature ever recorded so late in the season. I overlooked that because so much was written about the snowstorm on November 15th. So initially I said that yesterday was the warmest ever so late in the season, but that's wrong. But who's going to sneeze at 75? 75 degrees yesterday. And here at Rancho Rayo in Putnam Valley, Joe, the temperature hit 76 at 1:11 in the afternoon. So all in all, an incredibly warm day yesterday, and a couple of more, as I said, coming up for today and probably tomorrow as well.
And by the way, Rob Friedowitz, I follow him on Twitter, and
yes.
He pointed out that we had 4 days in a row like this back 2 years ago, as you mentioned earlier, also because a lot of some people are getting bent out of shape over this. We had a cold start to autumn. We've gotten into a bounce here, and now there's nothing here hasn't happened before. Okay, and it doesn't take away from the fact that right now, if you probably average it out with where we're going in the next couple of weeks, we're going to be probably close to average or maybe even a little bit below, in my opinion. Also, here we are in the month of November, and we may have a tropical storm heading for the east coast of Florida, and there are implications with that in a number of ways for the east coast late in the week and going into the first, very beginning of this weekend. I also think it's going to have a say in driving what's happening in the longer term. I don't know if you saw this, but people were getting all excited over the fact that CPC's 8 to 14 day outlook that they put out. I don't know if they put it out yesterday or they put it out Friday. Except for a small sliver of South Florida, which is above average for temperatures, the entire nation is either below or much below normal temperature-wise in the 8 to 14 day period. That does not happen very often.
I did not have a chance to look at that. The last I looked at the CPC was on Friday, checking out their 3 to 4 week experimental prog, and with that, they had our area, Joe, above normal in terms of temperature and below normal in terms of precipitation. And those CPC progs are updated daily. The only thing that does not happen is that on weekends they have a discussion giving you an idea as to why they went for Saturday and Sunday. They don't have that for the weekend. Monday through Friday, you can read the 6 to 10 and 8 to 14 day discussion, but they don't provide a discussion Saturday and Sunday. But they do give the maps. I'm going to look at that right now.
I actually posted the 8 to 14 day map.
Oh my God! Oh dear.
I mean,
boy,
a few people were pointing out. I think they mentioned that they haven't seen something like this since 2015. But I think there was also another date more recent in the last couple of years where we had a stretch of weather that they had a map that showed about 90 to 95% of the country is below normal temperatures.
But you see, Joe, if you're a snow lover here in the Northeast. Most of the country is below normal, but in the Northeast, it's either near to even above normal temperature-wise, while above normal precipitation-wise. So what does that spell out? That means that everybody in the country is going to be cold and snowy in places where it's going to be wet.
The map up there, I have the 8 to 14. Maine, I have the 8 to 14 up.
Oh, you got the 8 to 14. Okay. All right. I was looking at the 6 to 10.
No, the 8 to 14 is from November 13th to November 19th. So the 6 to 10 is going to take 2 days. The first 2 days of this, and then 4 other days that go into it. So that would be the end of this week and going into next weekend. But it's going to be a process here in terms of stepping down. And I think this tropical system is going to be a driver in all of this when it heads up into eastern Canada, because that's going to open up the spigots, I believe, is going to open up the spigots with regards to a flow coming back out of Canada.
Yes, and I knew Flo back in college.
Oh,
And
Jesus.
he could be very nasty in November. Yeah. Oh, dear me.
Yeah,
well,
you're batting 1,000 here, by the way.
Yeah, I know.
Meanwhile, here's the satellite. So let's spend a little time with this tropical system. So I think there are concerns overall. Let's forget the our area for a moment. One of the things that, Joe, that's got me a little concerned here is not so much whether this is going to get to be something very strong or not. I don't think it is going to get anything beyond what the models are showing as far as pressure. I mean, if you believe the GFS, which is the stronger of the models in terms of how deep this gets, Category 1, maybe borderline, maybe to a Cat 2, who knows? The Europeans, it doesn't quite get it that as strong. And we could.
Hey, I just realized something, Joe. I just realized something too. We're back on standard time. We can actually take a look at the whole run of the GFS,
which we're going to do. Absolutely.
Yay!
It's already far enough out that we can see what it's doing. So nobody cheat, because I haven't seen anything yet.
Right.
But initially, we've got this weather front that's approaching here now. That does whatever it does today and tonight. There's some showers on the radar. It's no big deal. But that's going to move on through. And there's a second band of clouds that's back up. Now, of course, they decide to refresh the image. There's a second band of clouds from the Great Lakes back toward Nebraska. And that really marks the leading edge of this very big high that is building into the eastern states. So I'm going to just say, if you're in say from southeast Virginia, I'll maybe make the northern edge a little bit further north than you might otherwise do. But let's say from the southern part of the Delmarva Peninsula, coastal North and South Carolina to Georgia and North Florida, the gradient with this big high is going to be exceptionally tight. And we got a full moon coming up Tuesday. I believe it's Tuesday morning when it sets, which means that we'll probably have peak high tides Wednesday and Thursday. If this thing winds up going towards the South Florida coast, there's going to be coastal flooding, and I think it could be sizable coastal flooding in that zone I just mentioned, from the southern part of the Delmarva Peninsula and then all the way down the Florida coast, from there south through the Carolinas, Georgia, and all the way into the Florida coast.
Oh, no question about it. That this is a nasty setup with the situation, the potential of that storm in the south, and the full moon on Tuesday morning, which will undergo an eclipse, a total eclipse. So the alignment is almost perfect. That'll really raise the tides up a bit higher than normal for Wednesday and Thursday. We often speak of the tidal lag. The highest tides are not necessarily on the day of a new or a full moon, but depending upon the topography of where you are relative to the coast, it comes a day or two later. So Wednesday, Thursday. I mean, what more could you? This indeed could cause higher than normal tides. It could cause beach erosion, significant coastal flooding. Not a very pretty picture coming up for the upcoming week. And you would think that we'd be talking about this in July or August. No, it was the tropics were dead in July and August. We're talking about it in November. We've already had 2 tropical systems already, for goodness sake. And now here we are looking straight in the eye of yet a third one. And this one, again, developing as we speak now, somewhere off of the east coast of Florida.
I'm just kind of drawing in what the surface may look like here. That big high is such a critical feature here, because were it not for that coming down, this thing would probably be going northward and then northeastward and out. But the ridge off the southeast coast of the United States that's producing all this record warmth that we've seen is going to hold firm north long enough, or it certainly seems that way, that this thing should get tucked in underneath it. And one of the things that runs through my mind is a lot of, we've seen a number of times with these ridges where the models just love to break the ridge down faster than advertised. And that's something I think we need to also keep an eye on as far as how far west this winds up getting, because eventually it is going to turn northward and northeastward. But we got to see how far west it gets before it does that. Now, the implications for up the coast, I believe, are going to. Now, we could go a bunch of different ways with this, but I think the primary questions are going to be if we wind up. Let's just say, just for an example, I mean, let's say we wind up with the track, and I'm just going to draw a hypothetical track where it crosses Florida, goes into the eastern Gulf briefly, and then turns sharply northeastward and rides itself all the way up the coast. What are we going to have if that happens? Are we going to have a system where the core stays well defined all the way up and then starts to feel the effects of a deep trough that's going to be out in the west that's going to come into play here? And perhaps we see it go, does it go post-tropical? Does it become, does it become a bit of a powerhouse post-tropical system that moves very quickly to the northeast, and we get into some heavy rain and maybe some strong winds for a few hours? Or is it going to get completely absorbed by the next frontal system late this week that approaches? Those I think are the big questions down the road. And then of course we don't ultimately know, again, how far west is it going to get before it starts to make that turn northward. That's going to probably help to answer those questions that I just mentioned.
Yeah. This is. I tell you, and again. The local news media will grab onto this. If it were just a regular coastal system or a regular rainstorm, they would say, "Oh, it's going to rain. It'll rain. There'll be a little gusty winding." But if it's given a name, oh my God, then it's like, well, and what is the next name on the list? We're up now to
well, it's N.
To N.
Yeah.
N.
N, as in Nancy or Nana or.
I know M was Martin, so it would have to be a woman's name.
Right.
I just don't have the name. I just don't have the list in front of me here. But if it gets a name, then they're going to say, let's say it is Nancy. It's not Nancy, but I'm using this as an example. You'll see every single TV newscast lead off with, "And Nancy is coming our way," and scaring the heck out of everybody. Of course, that's not going to happen before Tuesday, because Tuesday, of course, is the election. And then after that, maybe Wednesday, we'll all be ferreting through the results of the election. So then after all that is done, Thursday they'll say Nancy is coming, or it's going to be one of those stress-filled weeks, I think, coming up.
Well, they only just started putting out they haven't even had a run
Nicole.
yet. It is Nicole.
Nicole, that's the name.
Okay,
yeah.
So they already started putting out. They haven't started putting. I like to look at the hurricane track model guidance. They haven't run that first run of models yet. Probably will be coming up this afternoon at the 18Z run, which will be an hour earlier now than it usually would be. But we certainly won't have it for this show. Now I put up. This is the ensembles where the mean position. On the ensembles takes a pretty sharp turn to the northeast well before it reaches the Florida coast. And most of the members, except for one that brings it onto the Florida coast, the rest of them are all, offshore. The only thing is the operational runs of all the models, which I think have outperformed the ensembles for a large portion of the last several months anyway, the operational runs of the ensembles are all way to the left of what the ensembles are. So, and by the way, this is the 0Z ensemble group, not the 6Z ensemble group. So there were probably some changes with the 6Z run that we're not able to see. But again, I'd like to see the hurricane track model guidance with this to see what they're doing. In the meantime, I'm going to look at the watches and warnings map. Now they do have, I believe, what do they got here up in Florida so far? So we do actually already have gale. Do we have gale warnings up? Yeah, I mean, it looks like we already have. Well, we have small craft advisories up and down the Florida coast. They also have rip current statements up and down the coast, and gale warnings are offshore. But there are going to be gales going up here even if the system stays offshore for you folks at South Florida, but for the coastal residents, you have to really keep a close eye here because you're gonna have a long fetch of easterly winds for several days. And again, with the full moon and everything else, you're going to see that all pile up into one spot. And that also goes again for the Carolinas. For further north, you go up to, as we go into late this week, if we do wind up having to deal with this, this is going to be more of a 6 to 8 hour event if it's racing up to the northeast, which will limit what it can do. But again, I wanted to see just exactly where, what kind of track are we talking about? Are we talking about a system that is going to be have a bit of a tropical core to it, or is it going to be in the process of going post-tropical? Because that really does change the flavor of what you would forecast in a situation like that.
Yeah, yeah. And, before this whole mess arrives, possibly by the end of the week, I mean, we've got some interesting transitional weather where we're going to have at least 2 more days, as I said, today and tomorrow, of probably record-breaking temperatures. And then after a cold front moves by, much cooler weather settling in for tomorrow night. And then bright and sunny weather, lovely weather. You wouldn't think that we'd have a care in the world here for tomorrow. Actually, tomorrow will probably still be rather cloudy, at least locally, I think up until about 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning. And then very rapidly, the skies will clear and we'll get bright and sunny. Mid-70s tomorrow, probably, at least, as I'm talking about now for the Hudson Valley. Then much cooler weather, probably more like 50s, mid and upper 50s on Tuesday to near 60. Wednesday, bright and sunny, temps mid to upper 60s.
50s.
More bright and sunny weather. Excuse me?
You said 60s for Wednesday, 50s.
No. Mid to upper. I mean, here in the Hudson Valley, mid to upper 50s to near 60.
Right. I know, but you said just a minute ago you said Tuesday would be in the 50s, and you said mid to upper 60s. I figured you meant to say
sorry.
50s. That's all right.
I'm so
I don't want to
sorry.
leave. I don't want to leave wrong. People get upset over a 10-degree differential. I just want to make sure.
I know. I understand that. I apologize. But you know what? Even if it will be only in the 50s for Wednesday and into Thursday. Well, actually, for Thursday, we might jump right back into the mid 60s, Joe. I mean, a big jump later, and that sets the stage for what may be coming our way for Veterans Day and for Saturday. We don't want to forget that it is Veterans Day on Friday, and if there is any rain to be had on Friday, let's hope it comes after all of the Veterans Day celebrations for our armed services, the folks who served this country very well for all, not just now, but for those who served in the past. Let's hope it doesn't turn out to be a rainy, windy, lousy day for parades and other tributes on Friday. But then certainly we get into Friday night and at least a part of Saturday. And the key, as you mentioned, Joe, a few moments ago, will be the speed, depending upon which model you're looking at right now. It seems that the European model might be a tad faster than the GFS. And so if you do have anything planned for Saturday, you might be looking at either a terrible day from start to finish on Saturday, or most of the day on Saturday, according to GFS. But maybe things move a little faster, and the GFS, the European, kicks this whole stuff out to the north and east by midday or early afternoon on Saturday. Well, no matter which way you slice it, though, we have some good weather until about Thursday, and then after that, Friday and Saturday up in the air, so to speak, as to what this potential system, what Nicole might do as we get toward the end of the week.
I'm rolling through the new GFS. I was doing that while you were speaking, and the track of this, it's really weird to look at because it's moving. Actually, it's moving northward. Moves pretty much northward through tomorrow into early Tuesday morning, and then it starts to feel the effects of the big high and the building pressures in southeastern Canada and in New England, and then it turns sharply. It actually turns west and then goes southwest into the Bahamas. The GFS has it, 981 pressure, so it would be a Cat 1 type hurricane. But again, I'm not focusing so much on that. But more on that tight gradient. You see all those isobars that run basically from southern Delaware all the way down into southern Florida. A lot of large pressure change over a relatively small difference. I mean, you talk about a 1040 high sitting in northern New York, and a 980 pressure. I mean, that's a huge pressure change over about 1,000 or 1,100 miles. The gradient is exceptional in my view. I mean, if not, maybe not that it produces necessarily big numbers in terms of gusts, but it's a prolonged period of those northeast winds. They actually start Monday night and Tuesday morning, and you're still dealing with northeast winds right into Thursday night, and it looks like it brings it on this run, Joe, from the north. Once it gets back to the northern Bahamas on the GFS, it goes inland somewhere between, say, Miami, Miami, West Palm Beach, somewhere in there, on this run. Gets almost to the west coast. It comes out near Fort Myers, and then it starts to move northward from there, straddling the South and North Carolina coast. Meanwhile, we've got this cold front from a deepening storm that's coming out of the Rockies, actually moving into California with some heavy rains Monday night and Tuesday. Kind of impressive there for the West Coast. And that low eventually becomes a strong storm that runs up into Minnesota with heavy snows in the Dakotas and also into northern Minnesota with snow and ice. That brings a cold front sweeping eastward. I see, again, this is where I start to get lost a little bit because, you've got this occluded storm up near Lake Superior with this very big arm, occluded front that comes down. The tropical system has got an identity here somewhere east of Charleston, just sort of rides along it. So there's this is a very, very tough call for the end of the week and into the weekend. We'll probably get some downpours, but again, are we going to see that get? The GFS on this run, Joe, was slower with the tropical system, and that may not be correct. So a lot to work out here.
Exactly, and even the folks over the Hurricane Center, and also I looked at some of the discussions, and not just New York or Boston. I looked down last night at the Miami area discussion, seeing how the folks down in Florida are handling this, and they just echoed what you said, that this is a really tough call because there are so many things going into the mix as far as the possible strength of the storm, as far as the trajectory of the storm. So it's tough looking, it's always tough looking even more than a few days. I mean, we're trying to ferret out what may happen here 5-6 days down the road, and so much can change over the next 5 or 6 days. And you're right, the big player in all of this is that tremendous dome of high pressure. And you think about it, you say so. Well, in the month of November, what do you expect? We have seen on more than a few occasions large, extensive areas of high pressure spill on down from Canada into the eastern United States. That high is doing what so many other highs have done before it. It's just that this time around, it's doing it while a very atypical, anomalous tropical system is working its way up and getting ready to get rather potent, and then mixing that into the equation, making it a very tough forecast again for later on in the week into the upcoming weekend.
And the interesting thing too in the longer range, as far as from what I can see. Now here we are. This is Sunday. Today's November 6th. You can see how deep the troughing is in the western part of the United States. You have a pretty much a straightforward flow from the Pacific that goes right across the northwestern part of the U.S. and into the northern plains, and then the jet kind of turns to south to north into Canada. We're completely cut off by cold air. You've got a ridge that's sitting right off the east coast. You also can see, by the way, here's the ridge off the east coast today. Here's the lower than normal pressures all throughout the area from the Bahamas east to the Greater Antilles, and even extending down into the Northeast Caribbean. So we're getting already to see that low starting to develop. If you look, we showed the satellite earlier, you sort of see the signature here. But in terms of the implications of the long range, if you watch what happens now, there's your system, your tropical system, somewhere between Bermuda and the Bahamas and the southeast Bahamas. This is on Monday afternoon. Notice here the upper high that is now extending itself eastward off the east coast through the southeast U.S. This gets tucked in underneath that upper high, which is why it moves westward. Otherwise, if it weren't for that, it would just shoot out to the northeast and goodbye. So that upper high is holding it in. Then, of course, you've got the big surface high that's getting ready to build into the east on Tuesday. Now, you see how it's nicely tucked in there when we go into Wednesday. Then you start to see the changes out in the west, where the trough in the west gets replaced by beginnings of ridging in the west. You get troughing that shifts to the eastern lake. The western lakes. That picks up the tropical system and shoots it up the eastern seaboard and absorbs it. And now in the transition, it strengthens the features in southeastern Canada so that by the time we get to, say, a week from today or a week from tomorrow, you've got a rather chilly looking upper air that completely opposite of what we had. And by the way, I'm going to bring up a graphic that I drew for an article I wrote on my subscription site earlier. But this is the upper air roughly in about a week from now. And what you're seeing here, and we've often talked about, how much I really believe that when if you're looking for colder weather, you want that negative East Pacific oscillation signal, and that is the pressure pattern in the East Pacific, particularly the Northeast Pacific, when it goes to a position where you have much higher than normal pressures there. This is a recipe for cold air coming down from Canada, and you can see on the screen what it's going to look like in terms of the jet stream. You have that flow that comes straight down from, it starts up in the Arctic region, comes down through west central Canada, and then swings across the eastern part of the United States. And as that EPO signal goes more negative, you're going to see that colder flow begin to spread more and more as we move through the next 2 or 3 weeks. Deep trough east of the longitude of Hawaii, also another signature that you often see when you have a colder pattern in the eastern part of the United States. And I mean, this is the new GFS run. What's interesting about this, Joe, is that you can already see what's happening. The first trough early next in the longer range now, so we're talking the week Monday the 14th and 15th of November. That trough lifts out, but already there's another arm that's coming down from Lake Winnipeg. Then you could sort of, I don't have it out far enough, but you could sort of visualize that that's going to make for another deep trough in the east. And through all of this, the ridging in the northwestern part of Canada, that negative EPO signal gets even stronger, gets even more negative over time. So very interesting second half. We could have a very interesting second half of November developing out of all of this for the eastern part of the United States, in my opinion.
What did you say about 2-3 weeks ago that one of the models, you ran it out like 700 hours and was suggesting significant snowfall?
Yeah, around it was around the period around the week of November. Let me just make sure I got my dates right. I think it carried it from the 19th to the 26th was that period of snowfall that it had. It did have it in the long range on a couple of runs on the CFS model, which we all know what CFS stands for, which is can't forecast, and you can fill in the word that starts with the letter S.
Dear me.
The other thing, by the way, and this is something that I think we also need to pay attention to because this may have implications beyond November. If this verifies, but I've been watching the runs of the GFS with regards to the what I always like to call les vortex polar, the polar vortex in the stratosphere. We've got it keeps pointing to a major split developing after day 10, which is a week from Wednesday. And the vortex, Joe, stretches and splits where you have oftentimes when we've seen these splits, the primary vortex stays up in Siberia and you get this sort of daughter vortex that drops down into northeastern Canada. Well, this was what struck me about this particular run was the fact that it was the reverse. The stronger vortex drops into northeastern Canada with the weaker second vortex back in Siberia. And this will be very interesting to see if we get this. I have it out on the screen if we get this look in the stratosphere, because I think this would be pointing to a blocking signature developing as well as a cold polar signature in a long term, which let's say would be for the last 10 days of November and going into the first week to 10 days of the month of December. So if you're looking at the weather of the last 4 days and trying to make this a corollary into where we're going in the next several weeks or beyond, I personally think you're making I personally think that that's an error. You're making an error looking at that, because the pattern that we're in at the moment is the transitory pattern, not the dominant pattern. I think the pattern we saw from the last 2 weeks of September through the first 3 weeks of October is going to be more the primary pattern than what you're seeing right now.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. And I see that there are a few people on the chat board who are already jumping up and getting excited and hoping for a big snowfall. The cheers are being led by Mr. Contino, who wants to see a white Thanksgiving. I don't. I know you remember the last big Thanksgiving snowstorm back in 1989, Joe. All I know is I remember my wife and I traveling to work in the pre-dawn hours, and I almost had a major accident on the Northern State Parkway. My car did a complete spin out on that falling snow. I'm not sure if we really would want to see something like that with so many travelers on the roadways going to Grandma's house for the big feast. But we have had, and I again will mention, 4 years ago in 2018, we had that big snowstorm on November the 15th. So yes, it can happen. And for all of you out there who are enjoying the balmy breezes, again, enjoy them while they last, because things are going to be a changing after tomorrow. I do want to mention also on the chat board that we have had a number of, sorry about that, we got so much into this wild and woolly pattern that is ahead of us that we forgot to mention all the people who have been making contributions on the chat we want to thank Ken Musillo, Lou Bond, Howard A., Robert Russo, and also, Joe, we want to send our best to David Carter. He's asking us, all of us on the chat board, to please send good vibes for his wife, who has had worsening vascular dementia over the past few years, and he cares for her around the clock. And yet David has taken time out to be with us, talking about weather, and also hit the tip jar, and we want to thank him very much. And we all will
Thank you,
indeed
David.
send, we will be sending prayers and good vibes for his wife, again, who is suffering with some issues this day.
All right, and yes, absolutely, and thank you everybody who has hit the super chat tip jar. Just want to go back and just cover some weather that's going on at the moment, because we don't live in the long range, we live in the moment, or at least we try to, and I'm going to freshen up this radar because it's about an hour. About 40 minutes old. I'm kind of surprised, Joe. There's a fairly decent line of showers now moving through New Jersey, northern New Jersey, southeastern, down through much of the Hudson Valley, northwest Connecticut, and western Massachusetts. There might even be a heavier downpour or two in there. Not everybody's getting it, because I can see there's some lighter shades on the echoes, which would indicate that those areas, the rain may not be reaching the ground. I thought this would have all stayed to the west and fallen apart. There's also some scattered showers down I-81 in western Virginia, western North Carolina, seeing some some showers there too, extending down into South Carolina, southeast Georgia, and along the Florida East Coast. The Pacific Northwest seeing some rain and some snow moving inland, and probably going to see a large amount of rain and snow coming into northern and central California if the models are correct in the short range, which I think they are. The 7-day rainfall forecast from WPC. I actually want to just kind of jump to day 6. So day 6 is Friday, Joe, with the Friday night to Saturday morning, Joe. They've got about an inch to an inch and a quarter of liquid for southern New England down into Virginia. You see heavier amounts of an inch and a half to 2.5 inches plus for eastern North Carolina and touching coastal South Carolina. And then then of course it leaps over into another forecast period. Saturday, November 12th from 12Z from 7 a.m. to 7 a.m. Sunday, another half to 3/4 of an inch, and in some places in southeastern New England, 3/4 of an inch to an inch. So you can see the 7-day totals, significant rainfall and precip, by the way, significant precip in California, which is really good because of the drought there, the drought conditions there. Several to even many inches being indicated, particularly for the Sierra Nevadas, and that's going to be snow. So they're likely to get clobbered out there while the trough that hangs out in the west for another few days going into this week. Up and down the eastern seaboard, it's basically about 3/4 of an inch to an inch and a half. Heavier amounts, coastal South Carolina, coastal Georgia, right along the east coast of Florida, where we're looking at several inches or more. And that, of course, is going to be related to this probable tropical storm that we're going to have on the maps maybe by this time tomorrow. At the very least, I think at the very least, I think this is going to be one of those situations, Joe, where you're going to have the potential tropical cyclone advisories coming out because it looks like, it doesn't look like, to me, it doesn't look like you're going to have one of these systems where there's going to be a broad center and they're going to have to wait for it to get tighter. So I'm thinking start looking for potential tropical cyclone advisories maybe as early as tomorrow.
And I just thought of something for poor NASA. I mean, I'm just shaking my head. They have absolutely no luck with this. The Artemis rocket, which they were so proud to have rolled out and over to pad, I think 39B, all set to go for a launch a week from tonight to the moon. It does not have any people in it, but it's a test for possibly sending humans back to the moon by 2025. They've had so many delays, so many postponements with this, and they've now set it up, all rolled out. And now, once again, they had to roll it back to the vehicle assembly building for IDA, not for IDA, for the storm that we had a couple of weeks ago. And now it looks like if this tropical system does develop and wind up and get strong, they may have to roll the darn thing back to the vehicle assembly building again, which would again postpone the launch that they had scheduled for next week. Eventually, I'm sure they're going to get this thing off the ground, but it seems like they've had everything thrown at them but the kitchen sink. And this may, again, throw another monkey wrench in their attempt to launch the biggest rocket that has ever been launched, even greater than the Saturn V rockets of the late 60s and early 70s. But once again, it looks like there could be a problem because of the weather in Florida as we progress through this week. They certainly do not want to expose this to the elements, and they don't want to have those strong, gusty winds blowing up against this tremendous rocket over 300 feet high. So they may, again, unfortunately, have to wheel it back to inside of the vehicle assembly building to keep it safe as an unusual tropical threat comes into play for Floridians this upcoming week.
I just pulled up the icon model, which I think it's worth looking at.
That's Germans.
Yes.
What did the Germans think about this, Joe?
Yes, the icon model. Hang on, let me get that. Click it on here.
And we might as well look at the Canucks too, the Canadian model,
if it's available. Let's see. So here's the icon model. which has been running kind of in line with the European. And by the way, we should even look at the NAM. Same idea here. We've got a developing broad low, moves northward, can only get so far because of that big high building into the east. You can see the gradient tightening along the Carolinas and down into Florida. And by the way, we should mention with the east coast of Florida, when Ian moved off the east coast of Florida and went toward Charleston, there was a lot of coastal flooding that occurred, and a number the beaches along the Florida northeast coast are not in good shape right now. So this is sort of the last thing that they needed to see. It was something coming in from the east. The icon takes it over the northern Bahamas. It gets it to just about a Category 1 hurricane, making landfall, I would say, somewhere north of West Palm Beach, maybe a little further up the coast, maybe closer to Fort Pierce. Coming out the other side it goes near Tampa, but then you start to get the effects of that trough to the northwest, and you've got a low. It still has an identifiable tropical feature. See, the icon kind of holds the identity of this low, Joe. It takes it into eastern North Carolina, brings up some very heavy rains here Friday night into Saturday morning. Then I got a gap of time where I'm missing. There's about 12 hours of the icon that are missing. So we go from
right.
4 a.m. Saturday. The next frame I have is 10 p.m. Saturday night when the low's up in Nova Scotia. And by the way, you see those blue lines there. That represents the colder air with the next tide that's coming down behind it. So again, this is a mechanism for bringing down cold, ushering in that colder pattern. You mentioned the Canadian model. We could take a look at that. And it is in. So rather than run it backwards, let's run it this way.
Thank God. Thank God that we're back on standard time and getting all of this data earlier. By the way, I have noticed, and I don't know how many of you are fans as I am of CBS News Sunday Morning. They had an excellent essay about the return back to standard time. And you know what, Joe? I'm beginning to hear about a growing number of people. I've been hearing about the folks in Washington saying, let's have daylight saving time all year long. Let's have that. But, I'm beginning to hear now a growing rumble of folks saying, if you don't want to change the clocks twice a year, then why don't we just let them stay on standard time and be done with it? And a lot of different papers and theses on why daylight time is so much worse for us in terms of sleep, in terms of kids being out on the road in the dark in January or February because the sun coming up so late or whatever. So for you and I were concerned about that they were going to make daylight saving time complete for the entire year. That may not necessarily happen, at least not in the immediate future, because I think there's going to be a big fight, a food fight, if you will, about changing the clocks one way or another way. But I'm hoping that eventually we see the ways of Hawaii and Arizona and places up in Canada like Saskatchewan or whatever. I mean, just stay with standard time through the entire year. I mean, don't change it to daylight time. Just let nature be as it is or whatever. And then we get our weather data, Joe, at the time that we want, 8 and 12 months out of the year instead of only 4 months out of the year.
Well, clearly we're a priority. Let's just look. I think what you said a couple of days ago is how it's going to happen.
That we're going to go to daylight time all year long, and then all of us.
There's going to be screaming. There's going to be gnashing of teeth. I tell you what you're going to see, and I noticed it myself here because I had to leave early in the morning to pick up my friend Phil, who's sitting here, waiting for me to finish the show.
Hey, Phil.
Joe Rayo says hi, and he says hi back. So I had to pick him up early, so I left. Now my sunrises are late here. They're between 7:30 and 8 a.m. Now that we're back to standard time, we moved it back an hour. But I left I left about 7 a.m. or so to go to drive to Atlanta to the airport, and Joe, everybody's taking their kids to school because school starts here at 7:30. Okay.
Right.
And there's a lot of I live in a small town of 750 people, and there was a lot, there's a lot of traffic, people taking their kids to school. They go to standard time in places along the eastern seaboard, particularly I could see it in the big cities. If they're sending their kids to school in the wintertime where it's still dark until 8:30 in the morning, you're going to see an increase in traffic accidents. That's the thing that came to my mind. You're going to see an increase in traffic accidents because of the late start with kids, with kids going to school in the dark. You think that you don't think that those parents are going to be screaming to get rid, like they did in the mid 70s when they tried this experiment to go year
Right.
round and it didn't work. They're going to be screaming bloody murder again. So
Right.
I think we're going to have to go through that maybe 1 or 2 years where they're going to change it, and then there's going to be such an uproar to just either go back to the way it was or just go to standard time year round. And you're right, it's healthier. Studies have shown that it's the switch to the hour is not good for your body clock. It screws up a lot of things that we're only finding out about now. So yeah, let's stay on standard time. And again, the most important reason is that you and I need to get our data earlier. We don't need to be waiting an extra hour like we do when we're on daylight time. Canadian, by the way.
And we want. Okay, let's take a look at the Canadian.
Let's do it the Canadian. Canadian's kind of interesting to me because it goes to the idea that what would happen if the core of this thing winds up holding together as it moves up the East Coast. And the other interesting thing about this day run of the Canadian is that it is to the left of the last run, last night's run. Same idea, moves northward, then northwest, west, and then southwest actually it goes a little inland, a little further north, north of Daytona Beach to somewhere between north of Daytona Beach, Melbourne, or north of Melbourne. And then here comes that western system with which it's probably a little bit faster because the Canadians already got rain to New York City by Friday afternoon. But it maintains a definable, an identifiable tropical low center all the way up the coast that it tracks from Myrtle Beach to southeast Virginia to right along the central New Jersey coast to southeastern Massachusetts. I mean, it holds the identity of that tropical feature all the way up, and it produces quite a bit of rainfall. And then most of it's done by sometime late Friday night, early Saturday morning as it's racing to the northeast. The other thing I want to look at here while we've got it, I just want to see what kind of rainfall amounts this thing produced. So I'm going to go with, because there's nothing really to worry about in the first part of the week. I mean, the Canadian produces a substantial, a band of 3-inch plus rainfalls right up the coastline. And if we do maintain an identifiable feature with this, I think you may see some pretty hefty rainfalls. Let's look at the GFS. The GFS rainfalls are probably going to be a little lower. And it doesn't matter because it's not out far enough yet. So those maps are lagging behind. But you get the idea here, folks. There's a lot to work out with regards to the what the impact, if any, is going to be for the Mid-Atlantic and for the Northeast. I think we're going to get something out of this. I just don't know if it's going to be, something manageable or maybe it's going to be something less, let's say less than manageable when it gets here.
I hope it's not going to mean a case of, with those gusty winds with the gradient tightening up. I hope that we're not looking at a problem in terms of possible power outages. At least we don't have the leaf. Well, we still have some leaves on the trees here, but with fewer leaves, there's somewhat less. But broken tree branches and tree limbs or whatever could often lead. And we're prone up here, Joe, where I am, to power problems, issues with that. And so I'm hoping that we don't have to deal with that later on in the week or into the upcoming weekend as well.
By the way, a few of you have mentioned the fact I'm got a different shot behind me. This is the back of my kitchen. Okay, so I'm doing it this way today so that
they're missing the Christmas tree, Joe. They want to see where
the Christmas tree is there. See, there it is.
There it is.
So
Okay.
the lighting is actually better in the other direction, but I have a guest with me right now, so I'm trying to respect his privacy
Uh
as he sits there
huh.
scrolling on his phone. So anyway,
Yes.
um, just one last thought about the daylight and standard time thing. So Louis Orizio, you make a great point. He said there are rumblings of starting the school day an hour later so kids get more sleep. And so what? To which I would say, so why are we doing this? I mean, so you're going to adjust the hour of the kids? Why all this unnecessary upheaval? Why? Why not just leave it the way it is? Just go to standard time and just be done with it and leave it there at standard time. Everybody will get used to the fact that it won't get dark. It's at 8:30 in early July. It'll get dark at 7:30. Big deal. Okay,
Well, as
big deal.
I mentioned that some days ago that those who don't understand or did not study history are destined to repeat it. And so the people who were not around in 1974, 75, when this experiment was first attempted and it failed miserably, are going to, they're not going to know anything about it. And they're going to say, well, let's do it. Let's try it. We try to keep things non-political here. And I don't mean to make this a political thing, but the guy who's pushing this more than anybody else in Washington is down in Florida, Marco Rubio. And I looked on Wikipedia to find out how old he is. Joe, he was only 3 years old in 1974, so he wasn't around when. And I might point out that in '74, Floridians, when they heard about daylight saving time in the winter, they said, great! Oh, that sounds fantastic, whatever. And they went to daylight saving time in January, and within less than a month, the ones who were kicking and screaming and begging and saying, turn it back, we don't need it, was Florida, because that's where most of the fatalities and injuries for the children going to school were occurring, was in Florida.
Yeah.
They learned their lesson well. Those people who remember and were around back in '74. But again, Marco Rubio, what would he know? He's only 3 years old, and he obviously, as so many politicians seem to do, both Democratic and Republican, I might add. I've always said politicians know nothing about science. And if a good scientist would say, okay, before we say let's do this, have there been any repercussions, or did we try this before, and what happened if we did do it before? That's what you do. But obviously, some politicians didn't look back to when this was done back in the '70s and just arbitrarily said, yeah, let's do it. Sounds great, without remembering that back in the early '70s, they tried it, and within weeks, please change it back. And again, the loudest voices back then were from Florida. That's the home state of Mr. Rubio, and maybe he again should check this out. It's just amazing to me, and I agree with you, Joe. They'll probably push it through somehow or other. And say, all right, we'll do it, and then within months or within a year, please change it back. Please, it's going to happen it'll happen all over again.
Yeah, the tourism industry in Florida is a huge proponent of keeping it on daylight saving time. So that's where a lot of the
That's where it is.
That's where it is.
That's where it is.
I mean, it really, because it's huge. I mean, it was certainly not as big back in the day. We were talking about in the mid '70s. I mean, it was a tourist, certainly a tourist place to go to, but it's huge. It's a huge industry there, and they're the primary drivers of it. All right, you know what? On that note, just gonna let's call an end to the Joe and Joe Weather Show today. We've had a
nope. You want to hold Briller Jeopardy off until tomorrow?
Let's hold it till tomorrow. And again, the lighting is not as good. I don't look as good today. Okay, everybody can't see my hair and how beautiful it is. So I have, in all honesty, Joe, I have to run out because I have a meeting today of the Amalgamated Indoor Plumbing Society that I have to attend. So, we got to cut the show early. Also, by the way, I'm getting broadband this week. They're coming Thursday, so we're going to broadband. We actually haven't had many problems lately. Knock on wood. So hopefully once we go to broadband, I won't have to worry day to day whether I'm going to have issues or not. So we'll see you tomorrow, everybody. Regular. Do you have any schedule changes for this week or no?
Yes, we do have a library talk scheduled for Wednesday, I believe at 7 o'clock. That's the only talk that I have.
Okay.
So we should be in fine fettle tomorrow. And in fact, tomorrow maybe I'll do a brief little PowerPoint on the lunar eclipse. It's going to be visible for many areas, I think, because the weather will favor us for a view of that early on Tuesday morning before sunrise. So, hey, here's an idea. Get up and watch the eclipse at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. And then after you're all done viewing that, the polls will be opening at 6. You be one of the first people to go out and cast your vote, unless you've already done it, either mailing it in or doing early voting, whatever. We'll talk more about the lunar event coming up tomorrow.
All right. We'll see you tomorrow, 7:35 tomorrow night. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.